Well, as events throughout the Middle East unfold, Israel is understandably a very interested observer. And joining us now in Jerusalem is Ehud Yaari, a prominent analyst and commentator on the Middle East with a particular interest in Egypt. He's the author of Peace by Peace, a decade of Egyptian policy. And he's also an international fellow of the Washington Institute. Ehud Yaari, welcome to Late Line. What's it been like watching the dramatic events unfold in recent weeks from Israel's perspective?
Well, Israelis are, on the one hand, very happy to see a process of democratization taking place among some of our neighbors. At the same time, Israelis are extremely worried that the final outcome of this current turmoil in the Middle East may not be necessarily a change of regime in Tehran, Iran, a takeover by the Green movement, the opposition, which is far more liberal than the current regime, but over time, a takeover of Egypt and probably other countries by Islamist forces led by the Muslim Brotherhood. There are also some very immediate concerns for Israel, such as the degree of control that the Egyptian military still has over the Sinai Peninsula, 3 times bigger than the state of Israel, which serves as the main channel for trafficking Iranian arms and missiles into the Hamas-led regime in the Gaza Strip. So it's a sort of a mixed feeling. On the one hand, we would all love to see a Middle East which is marching towards let's call it more democracy, but on the other hand, there are short-term concerns which will have to be addressed.
Well, indeed, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned of the danger of an Iran-style Islamist revolution if the Muslim Brotherhood eventually takes over. But at the same time, the Brotherhood is telling anyone who'll listen that they will not be fielding a candidate in the forthcoming presidential elections.
The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt is a movement with a track record going back to 1928. They have patience, they have tactics, they have strategy. They have announced so far, and I've been talking to some of their leaders, they have said that they will not field a candidate for the presidency, but they will support one of the other candidates. And being the single best organized political movement in Egypt, they can sway an election. They are also saying that they will not strive to achieve a majority in the new parliament in Egypt, which is going to be elected, let's say, 8 or 10 months from now. And I believe these statements. The Muslim Brotherhood would like to retain their influence from the shadows and not pose as a threat. They are afraid of triggering a response by the military and other segments of Egyptian society who are not interested in Islamization of the system. But over the longer term, the Muslim Brotherhood certainly pose a threat, and they are certainly serious challengers to take over Egypt.
I suppose the question is how big a threat. If you look at the makeup of this protest group, it really was a very diverse representation of Egyptian society. So I guess the question then becomes, over time, do other opposition groups manage to find a voice?
You know, Ali, the situation now, although it's not made very public, is that all the different potential candidates in Egypt are urging the army not to call elections too soon, because nobody is prepared for elections. Let's say those young activists who organized what they call now the 25th of January revolution, they have no grassroots movement. They have to organize. They have to build a party from scratch. They need time. The same goes for the ex-chief of the International Atomic Energy Commission, Dr. Mohammad al-Baradei. He wants to run for president, but he has no organization. The same goes for the Secretary General of the Arab League, Mr. Amr Moussa, a former foreign minister of Egypt. He's certainly going to try his hand and run for elections. He has no organization. So everybody is telling the military, please take your time, stay in power, get us a new interim constitution, and call elections in a year or more. By the way, the military themselves, this is my information, were telling the U.S. government over the past few days that they are asking President Obama not to push for elections too early.
I suppose the risk is, though, that the military becomes entrenched.
Yes, you know, Ali, I do believe that the Egyptian generals have no appetite for staying in power. The Supremo now in the military junta, or as they call it, the Supreme Council of the Military Forces, General Hussein Tantawi, is 77 years old. He's sick. He has never shown any political aspiration. I doubt that he considers himself a likely candidate for presidency. The Egyptian army will act, in my humble opinion, in a manner very similar to the way that the Turkish army acted back in '71, or the Thai army in Thailand a few years ago. They will maintain the system. They will try to arrange for elections. They will retain their power, and they probably will try to revive the ruling party of ousted President Mubarak, the National Democratic Party, most probably under a different name, certainly under a different leadership, but they would like to have a party which is to their liking, a civilian party, running for the elections.
The Egyptian military has pledged continuing support for the peace treaty with Israel. How realistic is it to expect that treaty to remain in place in the longer term?
Yes, this is a very big question for Israel. The army, as was expected, announced right away that they will abide by all international and regional, that was the language, agreements signed by previous governments in Egypt, that is, including the peace treaty with Israel, which was signed back in '79. However, what we have now is few of the potential candidates, few of the players on the totally new Egyptian political scene are saying different things. I'll give you two examples. One, the Muslim Brotherhood are arguing that the peace treaty in Israel should be referred back to a new referendum in Egypt at one point in the near future, although it was already approved by a referendum of the Egyptian people back in '79. More threatening is the fact that one of the well-known liberal pro-democracy leaders of the opposition in Egypt, Dr. Ayman Noor, who was the man first to challenge President Mubarak, spent time in jail, was released because there was significant American pressure on Mubarak to release him. Dr. Ayman Noor was saying just 36 hours ago that Egypt has to review and reassess the peace treaty with Israel. And when we asked him what he means by that, he basically said that some changes and modifications should be introduced into the treaty, practically meaning that the part of the treaty, the military protocol, which limits the amount of Egyptian troops in the Sinai Peninsula, or allowed to be in the Sinai Peninsula, should be altered. That means that some Egyptian politicians are thinking that the Egyptian military should be allowed to deploy all the way eastbound up to the Israeli border, instead of the present situation where Egypt is allowed in the Sinai only one mechanized decision up to a certain spot in the middle of the peninsula.
Ehud Yaari, there's so much to ask you, and we are going to run out of time, but I must go to the issue of Iran. Do you think that Iran will be next?
I think there is a potential in Iran for a popular uprising. We haven't seen the numbers yesterday. We don't see the numbers today. But everybody should bear in mind that all revolutions in Iran take long time. Since the constitutional revolution in 1906 to the present day, every time there was a change of regime in Tehran, it lasted many months before we could see the result. So for everybody wishing for a change of regime in Iran, they have to equip themselves with quite a degree of patience.
And not just Iran, the rest of the region?
Well, I think we have several other trouble spots. I believe there is a serious situation emerging in the island kingdom of Bahrain, where the Shiite majority is demonstrating against the Sunni-led regime. I believe we may have a trouble spot in Jordan, where a Palestinian majority may or may not choose to start to ignite a revolt against the Hashemite regime. And we have a trouble spot in Syria, where we have the beginnings of popular demonstrations, but again not in the volume which will constitute a threat to the regime.
Well, indeed, incredibly interesting times. Thank you so much for joining us, and I do hope that we can speak again.